Thank you, Brian and Anna, for having me at this seminar with such thrillingly interesting and very exciting lectures. I'm very honored to speak to such a wonderful auditory with such an enormous expertise and excellent connoisseurship. Today I have the pleasure and privilege to take you with me to Dresden, the residence of the Saxon elector Frederick Augustus I, and since 1697, Augustus II, King of Poland and Lithuania. There he is. But better known to the world as Augustus the Strong. The Strong due to many aspects. One of these, of course, referring to his physical strength, which he demonstrated, by example, by breaking a horseshoe. The proof is still kept in the Dresden Armory, and you can see it on the slide. But apart from such amusing legends that, of course, were conceived by him who staged himself as a Hercules Saxonicus, his strength and boldness was to think big and to manifest his high ambitions by implementing his trailblazing visions. Although he was not an absolute sovereign in political terms, he absolutely succeeded in transforming Dresden into a vibrant and fascinating cultural and fashionable hotspot, with the most splendid and gallant court in the world, as some contemporaries stated. So I invite you for the next 25 minutes to follow me to this spot and to enjoy a look behind the scenes in Augustus the Strong Royal Residence Castle. Or to be more precise, to wander through his splendid state apartment and to visit a room to which during his reign the entry was granted only to very special guests, to the state bedchamber. The history of the Dresden state apartment was rewritten in 1718 and 1719. It was then that Augustus the Strong gave the order to modernize its architectural outline and to renew and upgrade the interior decoration. Until these days, the Dresden Residence Castle was a rather old-fashioned complex and in some parts even a ruin, since in 1701 a devastating fire had destroyed great parts of the north and the east wing. High hopes of Augustus the Strong to build a monumental and representative new palace had never overcome the planning status. However, in spring 1718, Augustus the Strong was forced to act when the wedding of his son, Prince Frederick August, with Maria Josepha of Habsburg was initiated. An event of great importance to Augustus the Strong, who still hoped that this connection to the House of Habsburg might provide some chance for his dynasty to reach out for the crown of the Holy Roman Empire. Though Maria Josepha had to approve the so-called pragmatic sanction of 1713, what meant that she had to renounce all claims regarding the line of succession of the House of Habsburg, Augustus the Strong did not relinquish his optimism and ambitions. The wedding should demonstrate that the House of Athene was able to stage a festivity worthy of an emperor's court and to surpass everything known. So the wedding festivities in Dresden took a whole month, 4 weeks filled with extraordinary events. During this event, the state apartment, of course, was of particular importance for the presentation of Augustus the Strong. It was a stage which served him as a background for his ambitious performance of power and majestic dignity. And thus, the level of splendor and sumptuousness the furnishing had to attain defined. The new state apartment should be equivalent to the most important courts in Europe. Thus, Vienna and Versailles served as references, and furthermore, the rooms were meant to surpass the competing courts in the Holy Roman Empire, especially in Munich and Berlin. The state apartment was situated on the second floor of the west wing and was exclusively used for representation. The king's apartment, where he stayed and lived during the regular court life, was located on the first floor. This apartment contained the bedroom where Augustus himself puts himself to rest when he was in Dresden. Since the state apartment was only used for very special occasions, the monumental and imposing state bed was only used for representational aspects. So I show you the ground plan of the second floor of the Dresden Residence castle, and this ground floor is part of a large drawing complex I will explain later on. But just to give you some orientation, I have enlarged it, and maybe it's interesting to know how the way into the apartment worked. So this plan was drawn when Maria Josefa was received in the residence castle. She entered through this gate into the great courtyard, and here's the staircase, a large representative staircase, and she moved all through the east wing, north wing, and here we are, the Eckparadesaal. This is the starting point of the Dresden State Apartment, following the first, the second antechamber, and the audience chamber. And the part next to it, you can see it. There's a state bedchamber, and maybe you can see it also here. So there's a canopy with the audience chair positioned, and here you have the state bed. So just that you have a little orientation. Following the ceremonial of the Habsburg court, the audience chamber formed the center part of the state apartment. It was reached by going through the Eckparadesaal and both antechambers. And just to give you an insight what the audience chamber looked like and now does look like, here you have an image of the audience chamber. And it needs some imagination what Maria Josefa has seen when she entered this room. So you see these pilasters here structuring the walls. So they were made in Paris, and it's gilt silver textile. So originally everything was crimson velvet, so crimson red, and of course gold. So that's, I think, you have to keep in mind. The function and the importance of the succeeding rooms was imposingly and unmistakably expressed by the ascending use of crimson velvet and gilded trimmings and passements. The state apartment in the Dresden Residence castle is one of the earliest examples in the Holy Roman Empire that includes a state bedroom. The first princely apartment with such a modified structure being installed in Schloss Rastatt shortly after 1700. But the Dresden state bedroom differs from Rastatt and other early examples, such as the state apartment in Schloss Schleißheim, Bavaria, that was installed by the Bavarian Elector Max Emanuel in 1719, so very shortly after the Dresden state apartment. In Dresden, it was not a sequel of the enfilade behind the audience room, but instead the state bedchamber was located parallel to the audience room and equals in its dimensions. So this is, I think, what you can clearly see. So it's directly parallel, and the measurings are more or less the same. And as I said, in other residence castles, the state bedchamber could be expected to be rather here in this position, but in Dresden they put it here. Different was also the position of the state bed, a lit impérial à la Duchesse, with the monumental measurings of 4.50 meters high, 2.30 meters wide, and 3.30 meters long. It was not placed in an alcove or separated by a balustrade. It stood free in front of the wall. Since the entrance to the state bedroom was restricted to the king and his special guests, there was no need to keep throngs of courtiers at bay, as was the custom in Versailles. On explicit wish of Augustus the Strong, the walls were decorated with hanging panels of green silk velvet. And it might be interesting to know that his private bedroom in his king's apartment was decorated in the same color scheme. The use of a different color clearly indicates the different function of the bedroom compared with the other staterooms. The green color works more soothing, suggesting intimacy in contrast with the boasting, vociferous crimson of the preceding rooms. The walls were vertically structured by pilasters of gold brocade, richly interlaced with gilt threads and applicated with sections of crimson velvet. So this is a detail that shows you the brocade, and it's really that way as I just mentioned. So you can see here these sections of crimson velvet. So this was not is not originally done in one process, but it was applicated later on the gold brocade. So underneath there is gold brocade, on top there is crimson velvet. Whereas the color differs between the audience chamber and the state bedroom, the splendor and quality does not. Like those furnishings of the audience room, the wall decorating textiles of the state bedroom were as costly as they were refined. This had been the objective that was striven to attain right from the beginning of the planning, as emerges from the preserved historic documents, as shows this quotation. The most costly and marvelous meubles, so it means fabrics, are to be used in the audience room and equally in the bedroom. This had led to the decision that the precious and delicately gold brocade panels were augmented by applying crimson red velvet elements to certain parts of the pattern. Only so, since the planners had been apprehensive that the gold brocade, due to its visibly sleek structure, could have made the impression of gros de tour, a textile not regarded as suitable for such a high-ranking room. Noteworthy are also the ornaments of the panels. Exotic plants like the pomegranate and ferns emphasize oriental features, which is a quite new motive in the decoration scheme of a state apartment. These exotically ornamented and costly brocade panels that border the green hangings, as well as the imposing state bed with its flying tester, were delivered by the gold and silver Seidenmanufaktur in Leipzig of Andreas Dietrich Apel. Whereas the gold pilasters in the audience chamber were ordered in Paris, the decoration of the state bedroom was also a mercantilist demonstration of the high capability of Saxon manufacturers. What makes this state apartment very special, if not unique, are the set of depictions that were made shortly after the wedding of the Crown Prince in 1719. Augustus the Strong wanted to have his grand event immortalized in a publication where engravings would present all the important ceremonies, stations, and festivities, and thus impressing his position among the reigning princes in Europe. And yes, I just told you about the wedding, and now we are getting more in detail with that. The official reception of the bride Maria Josepha at the royal palace was the apogee of the court ceremonial, and the sequence of rooms that made up the state apartment was all depicted in cross-section on the drawings. These drawings that were made in Dresden by several artists, as well as the engravings that were made in Paris after these drawings, have been miraculously preserved. And so this is the first sheet of this report, as I may say it. And here you have the reception in a detail. Even though the reception, being paramount for the grand and exuberant string of events that accompanied the wedding, is in the focus of the drawings and the engravings, they doubtless give invaluable information about the interior of the state apartment. They were made with accurate and detailed insider knowledge by Raymond Leplat, which you can see here, the head of the royal collection and the interior architect, who was one of the major persons involved with the furnishing of the state apartment. These wonderful depictions now allow us, 300 years later, to wander visually through the state apartment of Augustus the Strong. So I now invite you to join me on this tour, where I will first show you the drawings and thereafter the engravings, so that we are able to compare them. So here we are. So this is the Eckparadesaal. For a short orientation, I have given you the plan here, and the red dot is showing where we are. So this is Maria Josefa entering the state apartment, and what you can clearly see, so of course the focus is on the reception, but apart from this, you can perfectly see how the rooms are decorated. And it's not only the Eckparadesaal, but here you can see the first, so this is the first antechamber and this is the second, and just, it's such an enormous source for us in Dresden that we can learn about, about the furnishing, really the furniture objects. We can learn about the textiles that were applied to the walls. We can learn about the mirrors. So it's really a wonderful source. And here we are. So this is, as I said, the main room, the audience chamber with the most precious interior and furnishings, and also the audience chair under the canopy. So this symbol of power. And last but not least, we come to the state bedchamber, and what you can see here, so all the other rooms, they were crowded with people, so there was always a mass of, or a lot of other people inside and surrounding the group, but the state bedchamber was a very exclusive place. So as you can see it here on this drawing, it was only the royal family, so Augustus the Strong and his wife receiving the crown prince and the bride. And since there are not so many people in the room, this is quite a privilege that we can see everything else, and we can see the state bed, and we can see these armchairs which are decorated en suite with the panels on the wall, and you can see some, even some more objects. I will refer to them later. Preserved elements of the original interior decoration, such as furniture objects or mirrors, show that the drawings are extremely accurate in detail. Leplat, however, embellished only where necessary those parts that were in direct view. Because time was too short to realize everything planned, the drawings by Leplat show paintings on the ceilings that actually have never been there at all. The ceilings in the first rooms of the apartment were in fact left undecorated. But that is the ceiling decoration is really the only part where we can say he faked it a little bit. In many details, the surviving elements, but also the archival information prove that Leplat has depicted what was really in the rooms during these festivities. And so I give you here the cutouts of the drawings, and to show the examples that he really depicted what there was. I have chosen some of the objects so you can, for example, see this wonderful mirror that is a detail from the first antechamber, and so we knew that. So there's a photo that is the example, and there are still the mirror tops, and some of the panels here have survived and have now been reinstalled. And of course, you also see these beautiful caskets attributed to André Charles Boulle that are so present in the state bedchamber. They also survived. Now the view of the rooms will be shown as engravings. As has been remarked before, they were cut in Paris, and their pictorial presentation differs a little bit from the drawings. So here we go again, back to the start. So again, we are starting in the Eckparadesaal, and again walking through this enfilade into the direction of the audience chamber and bedchamber. And I think the differences can be most clearly seen on the first and second antechamber, since here it differs. Now there are paintings on the walls, and the commode with the clocks, they have been taken out. But more or less, they are quite close together. So here's the audience chamber as it was depicted in the engravings. And this is the state bedchamber. And again, you can see, so some details are different, but the whole structure, yeah, of course, is the same. Nothing was left to chance by Augustus the Strong when it came to the furnishing of the apartment. Even when he was in Warsaw, fulfilling his obligation as King of Poland and Lithuania, he was pulling the strings for the interior design and decoration of the different rooms. To have a good view on the developments of the state apartment, Augustus the Strong carried a regular and at times very lively correspondence with August Christoph von Wackerbarth, Generalintendant der Zivil- und Militärgebäude, or more plainly formulated, his Minister of Construction Works. This extensive correspondence allows us to get a clear picture of the king's ideas about the royal presentation in his own palace and its own court. In some cases, when the king's ideas were too eccentric or were outright old-fashioned and not covered by sacrosanct traditions, Wackerbarth did not hesitate to correct these. He answered his royal patron and master with outright and impressive honesty, and if necessary, with explicit objections. But then Augustus had great trust in Wackerbarth, who was very well informed about the ceremonies and etiquette at the imperial court in Vienna. Augustus the Strong's standards for representation were not restricted to Viennese imperial state apartment. He often took the furnishing of the palaces of the famous Prince Eugene of Savoy as standard for the latest taste of princely magnificence. And so I show you here the state bedchamber in the winter palace of Prince Eugene. And I think, yeah, there's the Dresden example to put aside. And I think you can see clearly that, yeah, the structure is very, very close by. So the panels in the winter palace, they were embroidered, so it was not a brocade, but more or less. And what's also important to note, so there were the fields in between. It was also green velvet. So the color scheme, the structure, and of course also the way of presenting the state bed. It was very close by, and also that the state bed was not positioned in front of the windows, but put on the side, on the small side. So this is quite interesting to know. So Augustus the Strong, of course, Versailles, he visited during his grand tour several times in 1687 and 1688. Was a focus point for him, but he had several more. So the Viennese court, of course, due to the ceremonial processes, but also Prince Eugene, since he was the most fashionable person at those days. The greater part of the correspondence between Augustus and Wackerbarth deals with the wall hangings, quite understandable in an age when textiles formed the most costly and dominant feature of interior decoration. However, several other sources in the royal archives refer to another very important group in the furnishing of the state apartment, furniture with marquetry. This furniture has also been depicted by Leplat with such exactness that the pieces are easy to identify. And, very prominent in this group are the large pendulum clocks, of which 2 stood in every room of the sequence: in the Eckparadesaal, the first room of the state apartment, and in the audience rooms. They were placed on high pedestal, towering above the multitude of coaches. So this is, again, an insight into the Eckparadesaal in the stated audience chamber. And here you can see this, of course, this very large clocks. In both antechambers, they were placed on commodes that were inlaid with marquetry. And just to show you that it's not only some guessing, but there was a real reference in preserved objects. So these Boulle commodes, they did exist, and we still have one of them. In the state bedroom, the marquetry furniture, consisting of 2 bureaux mazarins and the 2 toilet casquettes, formed together with the opposite armchairs and tabouret, the main type of furniture. This display of French marquetry furniture and the arrangements in the state apartment shows clearly how the king valued these costly objects as features for his glorification. They contributed greatly to the concept of representation of the monarch through his setting and his person. Again and again, objects with marquetry are found on the receipts of his agents in Paris, tables, clocks, as well as pedestals for the representation of bronzes. Very telling for the royal appreciation of marquetry objects is a passage in a letter in which the private secretary of Augustus informs his agents in Paris, Baron Nicolas de Montajon, that he should absolutely buy the inlaid furniture that he has listed in the letter. The objects refer to are pedestals, metal cabinets, and 2 caskettes with their stands. They are very much according to the king's taste, for du goût du roi. This can here be interpreted as being very much in compliance with the king's ideas about representative furniture. It is not known what purpose the caskettes might have had in relation with the royal wedding in 1719. With regard to their very high quality and their attribution to the workshop of André Charles Boulle, whose work enjoyed the special favor of the Grand Monarch Louis XIV, these objects certainly embodied Augustus' concept of representation, and herein very likely laid the function as well as their being veritable objet d'art, another passion of Augustus the Strong. The interpretation that the caskets were wedding presents to Maria Josepha is just a legend. However, their princely appeal lasted well through the 18th century, when in 1769 the new electress Maria Amalia Auguste von Pfalz-Zweibrücken had them brought out of the court furniture depository and placed them in her bedroom. And it's quite interesting that really in this time the interior lining was renewed. So before we learned in the inventory of 1769 there was crimson velvet in it, and shortly afterwards there must have been this change, since we some experts in Dresden did the analysis, and they found out this is satin of the late 18th century and dyed with a very special composition Dresden was famous for. Even if the exact whereabouts of the caskets is lost in the 19th century, they reappeared in an inventory of the royal palace that was made on occasion of the abdication of King Frederick Augustus III in 1918. Most furniture in the Boulle technique were in pairs, such as the bureau, commodes, and clocks, and when in the course of the partition between the state of Saxony and the former royal family, these sets were separated and handed over to family, the important set of the caskets of Boulle stayed together. So today, the current position can again be indicated the state bedchamber. Regarding the eventful course of the 20th century, this is the impressive result of a long-term, complex, and laborious reconstruction and conservation project. When the war finally reached Dresden on February 13th, 1945, the old city with the royal palace was destroyed. Plans of the GDR government to blow up the remainings were thwarted by local patriots by implementing the idea of a museum complex. Eventually, the reconstruction of the building started seriously after the German reunification in 1990. The reconstruction was carried out by the accurate studying and copying the remains and thus reinventing whole elements and structures. Especially for the textiles, the term Fadengenau was invented by the responsible textile specialist, Dr. Sabine Schneider. Literally translated, this means accurate to the thread, whereby the old techniques and original materials were employed. And I think this photo depicts absolutely clearly what means detailed to the thread. So really everything is done like in the 18th century. So with the original materials and the original techniques. The furnishings that were evacuated and stored away, such as the gold pilasters and the audience chamber, the mirrors, the paintings, and the furniture that had survived the war in the following years, more or less in good order. Conservation work on these objects lasted several years. To preserve these precious and often very sensitive objects, much effort has been invested in analysis and improvement of methods, such as depicted here. So just to show you again, so these are the Boulle coffers just before we started their restoration. So you can see the brass inlays, there's heavy corrosion in it, and the original design does not work or function anymore. And that was our goal, to return this, and I have really the pleasure to work with great people in Dresden. And so there's one of the conservators you can see here, Breitenstein, and she developed a completely new method to clean Boulle-marquetry. She used a gel for it, and yeah, that really gave us the possibility to clean the surface without being abrasive, or very, very, very less abrasive than before. Due to all this manifold effort, yeah, you can see the results here, of course. Due to all these manifold efforts, it has come full circle since September 2019. The reconstructed State Apartment illustrates the original intended splendor and majestic dignity to the visitor. And today, quite in contrast to the 18th century, when only royal guests were allowed to enter the room, all visitors are welcome to enter the state bedchamber and to enjoy, so to say, the splendor straight in front of the scene. This could have been the last word, but when talking about Augustus the Strong and his bedchamber, this might not be the due end. A man about whom is said that he would have fathered about 355 children. Well, actually, the figure is different, stating one legitimate child, Prince Frederick Augustus, we have already heard of, and 8 legitimate children born by his several mistresses, just to name the most famous, Moritz of Sachsen, Marshal de Saxe. But anyway, it shows that the bedchambers of Augustus the Strong provide more narratives than this rather sterile surrounding of the state apartment. Believe me, many more stories could be told about Augustus the Strong that would even make Brian Horton's mice and porcelain figures blush strongly. But that's another story. Thank you so much for your attention.